Mount Gilead, North Carolina, with shops and restaurants lining its main street, creating a scene reminiscent of a Norman Rockwell painting. But it's this painting, the massive mural remembering one of their own, that stands out in downtown Mount Gilead, the hometown of famed civil rights lawyer Julius Chambers. However, if you turn back the hands of time, the Mount Gilead of today is a far cry from the 1940s and 50s, when Chambers called it home, a young African American growing up in the American South and the era of Jim Crow.
Jim Crow was this complicated system that had infiltrated every aspect of American life by the 1950s. African Americans were perceived as inferior, second-class citizens. It affected the neighborhoods that they lived in. It affected the kind of access to education that they got. It affected the jobs that they had. And most of all, it infected the minds of white Americans. When they saw African Americans, they did not believe that African Americans were their equal. They did not believe that African Americans deserved the same kinds of things and services that they got.
Everything was segregated by race. If you were a doctor, you had black patients. If you were a lawyer, you had black clients. If you were a teacher, you taught black students. If you were a preacher, you had a black congregation.
These Jim Crow-era laws impacted everything from transportation, housing, medical care, education, and fairness in the judicial system. In Mount Gilead, the forces of racism and segregation proved to be a catalyst for Chambers to become a lawyer.
His daddy was an auto mechanic, and his daddy believed in hard work and honest living and passed those values on to Chambers. But in the work that his father did, he had to depend upon people paying him.
So this small trucking company had gotten his father to do some work, and they refused to pay for the service.
The incident with the person not paying my grandfather, and my grandfather couldn't get any justice. No one would take his case. He couldn't get a lawyer. That pushed my father into civil rights, where he believed that, I'm gonna make a difference and I'm gonna help everyone to achieve equal rights. That was his biggest motivation for him going on to law school and to become one of the greatest civil rights attorneys in the country.
After UNC Law School, he moved to New York City to earn another advanced degree at Columbia University. It was in New York that his professional career started to take shape. Another opportunity presented itself.
Chambers trained in New York as an intern with the NAACP Legal Defense Fund. And the whole idea of that program was to train lawyers to do civil rights work, primarily in the South.
Ferguson says Chambers knew exactly what type of work to focus on for the firm.
Chambers came into this community, the Charlotte community, the North Carolina community, to bring about change.
In the mid-1960s, Darius and Vera Swan lived in the Middleville neighborhood and worked at Johnson C. Smith University. They put in an application for their son to attend school closer to home.
Darius and Vera wanted their son to go to Seversville Elementary School, but they were denied because of this Pearsall plan. And so they wrote this very passionate letter about the need for children who are going to be our future leaders in order for them to lead, they need to be in integrated settings from a very early age.
When the board denied the request, the family took legal action. Chambers and the NAACP Legal Defense Fund led the multi-year legal battle all the way to the Supreme Court. And in 1971,
he shows how all of this is transpiring, how all of these corners that are being cut by the city leaders, all of the ways that they are finding to circumvent complying with Brown. And busing becomes a way. I'm not sure exactly how they came up with this idea that busing would work as a way to integrate the schools, but it becomes this, I guess, the key to integrating the schools.
Back here in Charlotte, integration in the classroom begins, and busing becomes a way of life. For Carolina Impact, I'm Jason Terzis reporting.